All right, welcome to part one of the Art of Core Balance presentation. This is a three-part series, and in part one we're going to be getting an inside look on a talk I gave recently about the underlying causes of back pain. And this is going to come back to muscle imbalances, and so we're going to talk about what they are and how they lead to poor posture and ultimately result in back pain. And back pain is the symptom. So what we want to do is we want to get to the root of the problem. We want to understand the underlying causes, and that way we can address them. And so I'm really excited for you. This is a great way to start your journey. It's really valuable information. Had a huge impact on my life. And it's just a great way to get started. You're getting yourself informed so that you can later, as we'll talk about in part two and part three, understand why it's happening and how to address the problem. What can we do to reverse what's happening inside our bodies? But you got to start with understanding what's going on. So why don't we just get started, and I hope you enjoy. See you on the other side. There we go. I'm also going to be talking a lot about pirate ships and flowers today. So for those of you that get bored easily, have no fear.
That took a turn that I didn't see coming.
Yes. So there is a little bit of excitement, not too much though. So yeah, maybe, who knows? Maybe he'll pop in. So yeah, I'm going to be relating pirate ships and flowers to the core, believe it or not. So, and before we get started on pirate ships, I just want to throw out this question because it's going to be a big topic here. So, what is posture? Okay? Does anybody want to try and give me like a brief answer?
Alignment.
All right, great. Yeah, so alignment is a great word, and you've definitely had a little bit of education in exactly what kind of alignment, so that's awesome. So yeah, posture is alignment, and I think everybody kind of just inherently knows generally what posture is, but I'm going to be talking about a couple of things about posture that are maybe not so known. So here we go. So posture is, there's two things I want to really emphasize. So posture is voluntary. We can control our posture. We can decide how to stand and stuff like that. But it's also involuntary. So there's a lot about posture that we don't have control over. And I wrote some definitions of involuntary here. So unconscious, instinctive, automatic, and reflex. So there are things that we can't just say when your mom or friend tells you, fix your posture. You can't always necessarily fix your posture. So, and we'll get into why. So it might be out of your conscious control, although we can influence it. And the other thing I want to emphasize is that, yeah, posture is static in the sense that you sit with good posture and you stand with good posture, but it's also dynamic, meaning that when we're moving, that's posture too. So everything we do, posture is all day long. It doesn't stop because you're reaching to grab a cup out of your cupboard, okay? So posture includes all of that, all right? So now we can get started. I just wanted to make sure we were clear on that stuff. So part one's gonna be about, like I said, muscle imbalances. So the goal is to get balance in our muscles and our core, but what sometimes, I have to begin with imbalance because we all experience it, and that's what makes core balance so important. So what are muscle imbalances first? So a quick definition. Muscle imbalances are imbalances in the amount of tension or tone in your muscles. And these are muscles that are opposing each other. So what are opposing muscles? We have, for every muscle there is an opposite muscle. So I'm going to take a simple example. My arm. So I have my bicep on the top, it flexes my elbow, there's an opposite muscle the tricep on the back of my arm. It extends the elbow. So a muscle imbalance in those two muscles would be if my bicep had a ton of tension in it and was really tight, and my tricep was really weak and lengthened, and I couldn't really straighten my arm anymore because my bicep was way too powerful. So that's a simple example. Most of the muscle imbalances we experience are in our core, and they're a lot less noticeable. So that's what muscle imbalances are. They lead to abnormal posture, joint dysfunction, increased wear and tear, all kinds of things you don't want. And they occur to everyone, so we all have muscle imbalances. There's nobody that is an exception to the rule, but they occur to different degrees. So some people have really bad muscle imbalances, and some people have very minor muscle imbalances, but nobody's perfect. Okay, and why does this matter? Before we get to the pirate ships, I just want to make sure that we understand why should I care about this, right? So our muscles determine our posture. If you look at the picture at the bottom, that's what we would look like if we didn't have any muscles. It would be a bag of bones on the floor, okay? So our muscles play a huge influence on the health of our joints and all that fun stuff. And it depends on balance. It depends on balance between the opposing muscles, like what I talked about before. And one other thing, there's a predictable pattern of muscle imbalances that occur in our bodies. So we know, I could take a look at any one of you, just one glance, and I could know which muscles are tight and which muscles are weak and lengthened. And that's because I have a trained eye and I've been educated in this stuff, but it's predictable. It's not something that's going to be very different from the next person, okay? And there was a man that came up with names. He saw these patterns and he came up with names with them, for them. His name is Vladimir Janda. He was a doctor and a scientist out of Prague. He's not alive anymore, but he really changed a lot about the physical health industry. So he came up with the term crossed posture syndrome, and that can be broken up into upper cross posture and lower cross posture. So we'll get into a little more of that later. We'll get through the boring stuff now, and we'll get on to some more fun stuff, okay? So enough about posture, why should I even care? Upper cross posture can lead to things in this list. So some of them might look familiar to you: shoulder pain, neck pain, back pain, TMJ, that's jaw pain, headaches, carpal tunnel, arthritis, all of that, okay? And much, much more. It's all connected. So, you know, our joints and our bodies, I could literally affect my jaw from having a hunched back because it's all connected. Everything's connected. I don't want to get too much into the science of it. Lower cross posture, really common. I've highlighted and underlined it. It leads to lower back pain. Very, very common. Also hip pain, knee pain, plantar fasciitis, it's all connected. So an imbalance in my abdominals and my lower back muscles can lead to foot pain. Okay, sciatica, arthritis, and you name it. Just really, the list goes on. So I promised you guys pirate ships. Here we go. Why do I care about pirate ships? They're beautiful. They have lots of sails. These sails, they undergo mass amounts of force from the wind, right? So they are propelling massive, heavy ships, and that's a lot of force on these masts, these wooden masts that are coming out of the ship. How does the mast stay up? How does it break and not fall over? Well, that's what I'm interested in here, okay? So that's why it's relevant. So here's a better picture of the mast. The sails are kind of rolled up. The mast is being held up by guy wires on the sides, okay? So we're going to be making a connection between our bodies, our spine, and the guy wires and our muscles. Here's a better picture. So that's pretty complicated, right? We've got a mast, and we've got tons of cables and guy wires holding it up. And that's really kind of what it's like in our bodies. So I'm going to go to a more simple mast design, so for example purposes, but our bodies are probably a lot more like that one, okay? So here's the one we're going to kind of look at. So that mast, that looks like a carbon fiber mast, so this is probably a newer boat, but it's that's going to be our spine, okay? And the guy wires are the muscles. So we're going to be looking at the tension in the guy wires. We talked about muscle imbalances and tension already. Those guy wires, they have equal amounts of tension in them right now. And if they didn't, it would look something like this. Okay, that's a mast that's been bent. And clearly there is an imbalance. So the guy wires on the right, they probably have more tension, or at one point did, than the guy wires on the left, and they pulled it over and bent this mast. Looks like it's metal. So that's a lot of power there. So that can happen in our bodies, believe it or not. So I've been saying guy wires, but I guess they call them shrouds. So the shrouds are going to represent our muscles, and the mast is going to represent our spine. Although it's not exactly a perfect analogy, because our spine is flexible, so we are susceptible to way more subtle changes in the tension of our muscles than the mast is. So we're more susceptible to bending and breaking and stuff like that. So a quick point of view of reference, we're looking at the body, we're comparing the muscles on the front of the body and the back of the body, with the spine being in the middle, okay? So the opposing muscles, every muscle on the front of the body has an opposite muscle on the back, like the abdominals and lower back muscles, hip flexors and glutes. So we're looking at imbalances in the opposing muscles on the front and the back. So a quick new definition for muscle imbalances is imbalances in the amount of tension or tone, that's the same thing, so muscle tone, in the muscles anterior and posterior to the spine, okay? So if we're looking at the body like that, we got the front of the body, the back of the body. And with that same example, the front will be on the right side and the back will be on the left, based on the pictures that I have created. So here we go. Get ready for a little bit of a morbid picture here, but it's not too bad. All right. We all have muscle imbalances, but like I said, they're to varying degrees. So we want to reduce them, and we want to try and strive for on the left, but nobody's perfect. So we just make it our goal. So pretty self-explanatory. The one on the left, those are the guy wires, right? Like the mast and the shrouds. They have equal tension. The one on the left, there is an imbalance in the tension. So the opposing muscles are the ones that attach to the same vertebrae. So the top one, on the right side, we're talking about the right side, the top guy wire, obviously the red one is the tight one, and the blue one is weak and lengthened. So it pulled this person's spine forward into this hunched position. And then we have the muscle on the back, right below it is too tight, and then the very bottom one, the muscle on the front, is too tight. And that actually looks like the natural curvature of our spine, right? So that's actually what causes the curvature of our spine. But what happens in us is that these imbalances become too strong and too much. They pull us more and more into this position when we want to try and stay more balanced and stay in that more upright position. So here's a little another thing I made on the computer. Pretty funny. So it's a little more complicated than this because we have a pelvis and we have a rib cage and we have arms and legs and all this stuff. So this is to demonstrate what happens with our pelvis and our rib cage. So look at the one on the left, or on the right, sorry. Look at his pelvis, it's tipped forward a little bit. They call that anterior pelvic tilt, okay? Now watch this. You see that? It tipped forward a little more. I did that again on the computer. I'm going to Hollywood pretty soon I'm gonna be in the production of animated cartoons. So that tipping forward is really, really common, okay? The muscles that are on the front, they attach to the pelvis, some of them, and they pull it into that position, and that can cause problems. So we'll talk about why. Here's an animation of the actual muscles. So you can see that the blue ones are the weak and lengthened ones, and the red ones are the short, tight ones. So like, look at the muscle between the pelvis and the rib cage on the right, on the back. That one's really tight, and it's pulling his pelvis up towards his rib cage. That's like our lower back muscles. They tend, remember I said there's a predictable pattern? Those muscles tend to become short and tight, and they are pulling our pelvis up like that and our rib cage down. And our abdominal muscles on the front tend to become weak and lengthened, and that's the pattern. And the same thing in the back. So that blue one, the lower one, that's going to represent the glutes, the buttocks muscles. Those tend to become weak and lengthened. And the hip flexors, the ones in the front, tend to become short and tight, and they pull us forward like this. Okay? So we'll get on with it a little bit. We talked about the name cross posture syndrome, lower cross posture, upper cross posture. So the tight muscles cross with the weak muscles, and that's why they call it a syndrome, and it's predictable. So the lower back muscles and the hip flexors tight, the glutes and abdominals become weak. Okay? So that's just a little more descriptive there. So this is lower cross posture. This is just a demonstration to show you guys exactly what's happening. But this also happens in the upper body too. So, going back a little. This is anterior pelvic tilt. So these muscles have a force on the pelvis to pull it into that rotating position. That causes problems, okay? So those tight hip flexors pulling down on the front of the pelvis, those tight lower back muscles pulling up on the back of the pelvis, that causes the pelvis to rotate. And here's some more pictures of real people with anterior pelvic tilt. So you can see, even though these are, they look relatively like young people and they're trying to stand up straight, their pelvis is tilted so far forward that you can just see it. Even though they have muscles and skin and everything covering them, you can just see that their pelvis is pulling forward, and you have their arched back like that, and you have their belly protruding out. And these aren't fat people, but they have bellies. So that's a real thing that happens. So like I said, that was all lower cross posture. This exact same pattern happens in the upper body. It's called upper cross posture. The tight muscles cross with the weak, lengthened muscles. And I'm not going to do a whole animation of skeleton stick figures for you guys for upper cross. It's a lot easier to visualize the lower cross than the upper cross. And also, I feel like upper cross is just all around us. We see people with that forward head and rounded shoulders all the time. So that's an explanation for why. So the muscles in the front of the chest, in front of the shoulders, they become tight and pull our shoulders forward. And the muscles in the back, our upper back muscles, become weak and lengthened, and they stretch out. And the muscles in the front of the neck, so we're pulled forward like this, but we don't want to be looking at the ground all day. We want to look up, right? So we look up, muscles in the front of the neck, weak and lengthened, back of the neck, tight and overly shortened, okay? So, and if you put those two together, upper cross and lower cross, that's what Vladimir Yonda called cross posture syndrome. Okay, here's upper cross. Real people. Real examples. And it doesn't matter your age. It can happen at any age. It can happen to a 4-year-old child. And we'll talk about why this stuff happens in the next part. That's pretty bad though. So computer posture is definitely a factor. Just something to make it relevant. So if you're saying, why do I care? I don't care about my posture. Well, yeah, they do it causes all those chronic pain syndromes that we talked about in the beginning. Also, look at what it does just to the weight of your head. So the weight on your spine, just moving your head 2 inches forward, it's 20 pounds heavier. Okay, and that's because of torque. That's because of the lever arm on the spine. So we want to keep the stress off our joints as much as possible. All right, part 2. So I promised you guys flowers. We'll get into some flowers now. They're a lot less morbid. So why do these muscle imbalances happen?